people from Louisiana is joining already, but we're going to get started because otherwise we will go longer out of our time. So, good afternoon, everybody. And today we are presenting the third session of our community practice. We will be talking about how a second language is acquired. And among the things that we have to say, before I say the expected outcomes, I just want to remind you to please mute your phone by pressing *6. And if you need to talk, you can also unmute it by also pressing *6. Please feel free to ask questions or make comments at any time, and you can use the chat area to record the questions. I have been receiving some questions directly after the webinar, and I hope that you have received the comments or the answers of that. We are again recording this webinar so that you can access to it after this through our website. I will be letting you know as soon as the webinars are already uploaded in our ELL portal. So today, as we talk about language acquisition, we want to talk a little bit about how the first language is acquired, and then recognize some myths about how people misinterpret the process of a second language, how it is acquired. Then we're going to be talking about some factors that affect the learning of this second language, and be aware of the most common approaches on how you can recommend the teachers if they are going to be working with the ELL. Then at the very end, we are going to identify some specific features that we recommend when you develop the curriculum for the ELL, and then, of course, how the academic standards and the achievement standards can relate to the general standards, but specifically giving some additional support for the ELL. And finally, we're going to be talking about the characteristics of authentic assessment. So we have an afternoon full of information, and I hope that we have enough time to go through that. So how is the first language acquired? Even though there's a lot of theories, I'm not going to go through them because of our focus is second language acquisition. But what we can really say is that the first language is a progression of cognitive and social skills. So the child starts learning the language together with the social functions of language. And even before they talk, they know where to use what part of the language. So you can see the babies that want to caught the attention of the mother and may say some noses, even though they are not utterances, legible utterances, the mother will know what the baby needs. So the experiences that the baby has with the family and with the community are very important because that's the area that is going to be developed through those influences. So it is said that language shapes thinking and vice versa. Thinking helps to shape language. Because through language, the child is starting to understand the surrounding world where he or she is living. So during the course of his lifetime, that child will develop more domains of the language and will increase his cognitive level. But we have to understand that even the GT students, when they come into the school, when they are 5-year-olds, they have not mastered their native language. And this is important because many people believe that when they are going into the classroom for the first time at kindergarten or pre-K, they already know a lot of words, but they still don't know too many ways of using those vocabularies appropriately. Again, the language is also learned through the culture, because the experiences with the family have the culture embedded. So let's say, for example, if the family is shy and not very social, the child will learn the language in that environment, so it will be very limited. While on the other hand, if the family is more open and is always participating in sports or events with the family, then the child will learn more and more language. And by the time that he has 5 or 6 years, they already have internalized their basic values, but at the same time, they have already known how to learn. So when they come to school, they already have their schema in their minds, and they already decide how are they going to be learning. Oops. Okay, there are some universal patterns of how the first language is acquired. So the child is going to first learn how to listen. Once the child learns how to listen, they start speaking. They start making some words. And when they go to school, they start reading, and then the last skill that they develop is writing. That is when you relate that with the first language, because it doesn't happen the same with the second or more languages. So, and they go through practice, trial and error. There's no way that they can be perfect on the first time, but the difference is that when a child, let's say a 3-year-old, is saying a word incorrectly, the reaction of the adults that surround the child is not to criticize them, but just rephrasing, and they say, oh, okay, so what you want to say is blah, blah, blah. So the input or the reinforcement the child receives when they are making an error is a positive, is very constructive. While if the child doesn't do that, doesn't do correctly in the school, many times he or she is criticized. That is one of the reasons why we call the English language learners the invisible students, because they're afraid to participate openly in the classroom. There is no specific time that can say, okay, it will take them 3 months or 4 months or 2 years. Between the time that the child starts learning new words and how to apply them. Every child is different, and there is no specific time. So the more positive input the child receives, the better is going to be in mastering the language. So it will take him about 2 or 3 years to up to 5 years to have the language he needs to connect with the society where he is embedded, just to connect with the community, his parents or her parents, and all the surrounding environment where he is living. Now let's see how much we know about this. So choose true or false. Number 1 is first language acquisition can happen only at home with the family. You think it's true or false? Please write down your answers in the chat section. Number 2, the first thing non-English-speaking students must do is learn English. Forget about the language, just learn English. Proficiency in the first language helps children acquire the second language. And then the last, young children can pick up academic language quickly when they enter school. What do you think? Is that true or false? Don't be shy. Try to write your answers in the chat portion. Okay? Anyone else who is on the line that would like to answer these questions? Okay. First language acquisition can happen only at home with the family. Of course, that is false. Very good. The first thing non-English speaking students must do is learn English. Again, it's false. Correct. Proficiency in the first language helps children acquire the second language faster. That is true. The more proficient they are in the first language, the easier it's going to be for them to learn a second language. And then number 4, young children can pick up academic language quickly when they enter school. That is also true. That doesn't mean that they are going to catch up with all the academic language they need, but because they are open to learning, these children, when they go into school, they catch up with the academic language really fast. Now, let's go with second language acquisition. It is equally complex, the first language or the second language. And also it goes through different stages. The contact that the child has with the native speakers will provide them with a speech or with the forms that they can learn. Many people believe that if the child has a lot of vocabulary, they will learn English really fast, even though vocabulary is one of the elements that are very important in the process of language acquisition. It doesn't mean that that is enough, because there are many words that are used in different settings. So, say for example, if I teach the child table, mesa, supposedly if he's a Hispanic student, so tables can be a table in the dining room, a table of contents, a periodic table. So because the words have different meanings according to the way you apply them, it is important that the English language learners has a lot of opportunities to work with the native English speakers so that they can learn more and more by listening to them and not just only by what the teacher teaches. So, however, there are other influences that impact the learning of a child. Okay, so if possible, whenever possible, it is important that the child develops a second language through the language domains, reading and writing. I receive a lot of questions, and several times that they ask me, if the child is not good in Spanish and I am not good in Spanish or in the language of the child, how well is for me to teach him how to read and write in English? Well, the problem is that because they don't have the foundations in the first language, it is really very, very difficult for them to acquire the second language. They can acquire the sound. They can acquire the rhythm because they memorize their spelling, but that doesn't mean that they comprehend what they're reading or writing. So research has found, many studies have recommended that the more convenient way to teach them how to acquire second language is by giving them oral and written instruction in their native language. However, we know that not all the times is possible. We don't have teachers that learn or that have already learned different language. We don't have too many of those. But as much as it's possible, we should look for that. Now, yes. Is there someone wanting to ask something? You can unmute your phone. Denise or Kathy?
I'm afraid that was my stapler. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, that's okay.
Thank you, though. I will put my phone on mute.
Okay. So, but if you have any questions, just please feel free to interact.
Thank you. The only thing I would say at this point is my computer was not letting me select an answer for the last checkup.
Oh.
So I will let you know if that happens again.
Okay, that's good. So as we say, in the first language, the child first learns how to listen, then speak, then read and write, which are the 4 domains of language. When you are studying the second language, it's a little bit different. You first learn how to listen, then you advance with reading skills, then you get the writing skills, and the very last skill that you can develop is the speaking skill. The reason is because of the same thing that I just mentioned, that there are so many options of the use of languages, of the words, that it's very difficult for a person, for a child, to learn where and how to use those vocabularies. So for a long time we have seen, and everybody says that in order for a child to comprehend reading, it has to make a transfer to background knowledge. So language acquisition is not different. The child or the person who is learning a second language needs to find that connection with what he or she already knows. And usually when you are going to talk about a language, when you're referring to a language, you have to go either to your first language or maybe to parts of the second language that you already know. But if you don't have that connection, if for any reason you cannot make that find that relationship, learning is not going to happen. So there is many other things, as I mentioned before, that are important so that the child comes to the school and is willing to learn. Because as I said, when the child is at home, he already develops language, he already develops the social function of language, what to use, what word, how to address to the adults, how to address or to face or to solve different situations. So when they come to school, because the environment is so different, it is very difficult for them to understand or to change their schema and be adapted to the social or to the school culture. So all the students, regardless if they are ELLs or they are low socioeconomic, every student brings to the class an array of social, emotional, and academic needs. Those are the ones that affect their learning. So past experiences are very, very specific. So for a mainstream student, for a native English speaker student, well, the experiences that child brings to the class are very common and are aligned with what are the expectations of the school. While in many cases, the English language learners are survivors of war, or they are refugees, or they are escaping persecution, or they just are immigrants, but are immigrants who change their status, who change their surroundings completely 360 degrees. So for them to gain their self-esteem and their self-confidence, it is very difficult. And because in the school environment, the culture of the school is so different, then in many cases, the students do not want to learn. They are not motivated to learn. Especially that happens with older students, say, for example, the high school students or the middle class students. So the attitude that the learner has towards the learning a second language is very, very impacting. So they can experience anxiety, so the behaviors, the personality affects, the attitudes about gender roles. Say, for example, in Latin American culture, gender is very, very significant. So the role of males is completely different from the role of females. So the cultural differences. So every child has to overcome those challenges in order to be prepared to learn. So because the school has a prepared protocol to learn and assigned values of what they consider are the ones that the students need to demonstrate their proficiency, well, because they are so different from the other children, that's when they have so much conflict. And then they say that children are lazy, children, they don't want to learn, they're unmotivated, and it is hard for a teacher to understand that it is not that they are not interested in learning, it's because they need to adapt to their new culture, to the new environment. Cognitive and academic development in the first language, as we said a little while ago, is very important. The more literate the student comes in their first language, the easier it is for him to get a second language. And you can see if a child from a diplomat or for students who come to study their master's, international students, those children already come with a foundation in their language, in their native language. So when they enter school, they catch up with a second language quite easy. However, the reality in our public schools is that most of our children come from families that are not very literate and also from families that have a lot of conflict in their own, so the cognitive and academic development in the first language is not very strong. And this is one of the reasons why the children have to overcome so many challenges, because they don't have the concepts. So they have very, very limited concepts of what's going on in the classroom. And it is very, very important. And the other day we were talking about the importance of identifying the level of literacy in the subject from the children that are coming to our classes. Usually, in most cases, they test them or they identify the level of language proficiency, which in most cases is not at the same range as the content proficiency. The content knowledge is always, or most of the cases, is lower than what they need. So they are placed in a grade that is not according to what they know. So the students have to not only to overcome the language, but also to learn the content, which is really, really hard for them. Now, if you have a bilingual who is proficient in both languages, the research has proved time after time that bilinguals really well prepared outscore the monolinguals in the achievement, but that takes time. So the dual language program, which is being established in many, many states, is useful because you are providing the opportunity to the children to develop two languages at the same time. So one of the things that we need to remember is that if we isolate the children, say, for example, we have that pull-out program that we have mentioned in the past about taking the children out of the classroom setting and then trying to give them a class only about skills to understand the language. Well, if that is not happening because the child has to be in the class listening to the content that the teacher is providing, but the difference is that the teacher has to be aware that he or she needs to give that information in several ways, so in several levels. So students need to feel that they are instructors and they have high expectations, that the teacher has high expectations on them, but and have an effort, put an effort in trying to understand what the teacher is saying. So there are external factors as the family, the parents. The parents need to become an active part of the children. And many educators believe that because they don't master the native language of the parents, they cannot approach the parents. But that is not true. They always can find ways to approach the parents of those English language learners, because those parents are the main partners of the teachers. They know the language and they love their children. So they are not going to try to take advantage of the child or just not doing what the child needs. They are going to understand the child and provide the information they need in their native language. So if you want to increase your parental involvement, just try to tell them not what to do, but also it's very important to tell them what the school expects from them. Why are so many differences between the school system here in the United States and the school system in other parts of the world? Say Asia, say Latin America, the system is completely different. So, and the expectations for the parents are different. So that's one of the reasons why parents don't come to the school. But if a teacher tries to bring the parents in different ways, using different events or tools, that will be very helpful for the English language learner. Now, about the program. The program needs to be integrated and provide different learning opportunities. So say, for example, that I am going to present a class, and the way that I'm going to check if the children master the standard that I'm using can be in different ways. I can ask the mainstream students to write an essay, and then I can ask the English language learner, according to the level of proficiency where he or she is, I can ask him to make a periodical or to draw the information that he elicited from the lesson. So it is there are many ways that the teachers can use differentiated instruction just to provide opportunities for the ELL to work in their level without taking out the level of difficulty. So for successful programs, try to motivate the students to learn, convince them that you believe in them, because otherwise they won't believe it. Teach them good study skills, challenge them, support them, and demand that they perform. So don't be shy. I believe that in many schools I have seen the theory that we say, the pobrecito, poor guy, he doesn't speak English, I'm going to make it easy for him. So that is not going to help him. We have to have high expectations and demand that they perform so that they can have that level of trying to be better and better every day. Basic principles to help ELL succeed is high expectations, different opportunities, challenging curriculum, instruction that builds based on their background knowledge, recognize the academic achievement of each student. For example, I have seen that in many places the child makes progress in the standardized test, but he or she still does not achieve the level of that would make him qualify as proficient or more proficient. And well, everybody needs to be recognized for whatever your achievements are. And the students who are coming with different backgrounds, they really need it more because they have a series of social and emotional needs that not all the children have. So you can also suggest to keep the portfolio so that they can check for the improvement, try to publish the work of the ELOs, and try to read them in their native language. If you don't have books, suggest them, or you can access the embassies or consulates from the different countries. Usually, they provide books in the native languages. So any question or comment so far? Okay. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about the approaches. And these are approaches that have been in here for a long, long time. It has been in practice for a long, long time. It's not a recent research, but basically it will help the teacher because there are different ways of approaching, and together with the learning styles of their students, they can use one or the other, or take the best one from this approach or take the best one from another approach. You have the grammar translation approach, where vocabulary is taught in the form of lists, and then they have to elaborate sentences with that vocabulary. They have to start writing paragraphs using that vocabulary, and classes are taught in the student's native tongue. But if they can't be that way, they are equipped with a dictionary. Then we have the direct approach, where a couple of students present a dialogue, conversational style, and then from there, the other students start elaborating with additional activities. We have the reading approach, which is the lecture approach, as we know it, where the teacher reads a passage, or they, in groups, they read the passage and they elaborate from what they have read. One thing that this approach is really good, especially if you are working as cooperative learning in teams, because the children will help each other in understanding, and they can put in practice different study skills. Then we have the autolingual method. Okay, it's the same. Now, instead of they practice, say, for example, today it's Monday, and I'm going to have a math class. So they repeat it several times in different settings, but there is no grammar, but they learn by memorizing the sentences. This method was used in Second World War II, in World War II, and it was really practical for the soldiers, for the army, because they would repeat and learn the main sentences that they believe they would need when they were in contact with people coming from other backgrounds. Then we have the communicative approach, and again, as I'm telling you, these are not recently research-based, but throughout the years, something from these approaches have been useful to specific type of students with specific types of learning styles. We have the total physical response, which is very practical for the young kids, where you teach them to jump the verbs, the action verbs, the action words, and then the teacher represents them. So she jumps, the students say, oh, you're jumping. So she sits, now you're sitting. So It's based in the idea that the child repeats the action that the teacher is representing. They don't look about grammar, they just look about in understanding and memorizing the way of use of the words that are studied. Then we have the natural approach, and for many years this was, wow, the best of the best. And even though it is good, I just put it in here because there are two parts in this approach that have been proved very, very effective. Of course, the number two, that there's a natural approach of the rules of language, can be one of them. But what I will always recommend is the affective filter hypothesis, because the students have that emotional need that is so important for them. And if you, as a teacher, do not look at how you can help or support the child to overcome that emotional need, the Krashen calls them affective filter, but what I say is their motivation goes to the ground, their self-esteem goes to the ground. So this is one of the recommendations that have proved very successful. If the teacher pays attention to the emotional part or to the affective part of the student, the results are going to be very, very different. Then we have the input hypothesis, and this is the last one that I believe that is very important, because what it says is that you have to provide comprehensible input. That means that you have the background, you relate it to the background of the student, and then you give them something new every time. So it builds from the background of the student to acquire the new languages. When we go to that to the very last webinars from this series of the community practice, you will see that all these approaches have something that can help the teachers to give them ideas on how they can prepare their lessons or their instructional practice for ELL. So besides those approaches, now let's see about the curriculum, because the curriculum has to be aligned with the standard curriculum. There is no way that I'm going to teach something to my general classroom and then I'm going to teach something different to the ELL. We can talk about Martin Luther King, for example, and we're going to talk about him and what he did, but because I'm going to use a differentiated instruction, that means different levels, for my ELL, I'm going to give him a book that talks about what I want to focus on, but it's easier than for the standard class. So you are using the same content, you are using the same topic, but in a different level of difficulty. And that is the idea that the curriculum for the ELL needs to be aligned. The methods of instruction can be modified, but it just reflects what the teacher needs to understand about this, is that it is the knowledge of the student what will give the possibility, what will provide the possibility for them to learn with the same curriculum, rather than just giving them. Sorry, I didn't speak well. Okay, so many teachers believe that they give the class, the middle and high school specifically, they give the class, the ELL doesn't understand, they do not complete the assignment because they don't understand everything. So when they have study skills or a session with a ESL teacher, they send the student with that incomplete assignment, and the ESL teacher helps the student by translating it to him or her so to complete the assignment. Well, that is not working because the student is not learning. So in order for a student to learn, you have to differentiate the level of difficulty that you are going to require from the student. So you have to have achievement standards together with content standards so that you can evaluate the child in different ways. So say, for example, that I have a standard that says that the student will write an essay on Martin Luther King's message, and he has to include 3 facts and 4 details, whatever. So that would be my task to give it to the mainstream students. Okay, what can I do to work with the ELOs? Well, I'm going to give them also to write 10 sentences about what Martin Luther King conveyed in his discourse, and then what do they think. So you're not going to give them to write an essay, which is a little bit more complicated than 10 sentences. And say that you have a beginner or newcomer. Well, that child, you're going to give him a book about Martin Luther King with a lower left side, but also you're going to ask him something. You're going to say, okay, I want you to draw what you understood about what is important from Martin Luther King. So all the class is acquiring the knowledge of the important facts about that we have to learn or that we are trying to learn from Martin Luther King. But every single group or every single layer, we could say, for the language proficiency of the students, will have a different way of demonstrating that they understood the concept. So your achievement standards, your achievement expectations will be at different levels, but they are still at the same quality or the same content as the as for the mainstream students. Another thing that we always need to think about is that the achievement expectation doesn't mean to decrease the content. You have to provide different learning opportunities for the ELL, but under the same grade level academic content standard. So when the teacher has the content standard, he or she has to develop what activities or how am I going to present this so that all of my students understand what I want to convey and they master the standard. When we do that, it is necessary that we sit and we prepare our lesson in a way that we have, okay, this is the first part. A lesson is 3 parts. Okay, what is the material that I'm going to be using to get them motivated in whatever we're going to be talking about? So you look for the books or for the YouTubes or Realia, whatever you're going to be teaching, you have to look as a teacher, what are the things that I need so that every child in my classroom understands what are we going to be talking about. So maybe you would have a discussion about what everybody knows about Martin Luther King and make a KLW, the chart. Or maybe with the Realia, you can even play with the students to make them focus, start focusing or motivating in what you are going to be teaching in the class. So then you have that, then you already have now you provide the content in different ways, and then you ask for them to develop different activities. One of the things that is missing very much in our classrooms is the language objectives, because after all, You want your students to learn English because that is the whole idea. Not that they learn too much the native language, but that they learn English in a level of proficiency that they can be sitting in the classroom with only English-speaking students, and they can understand and perform at the same level of proficiency. So language objectives have become a very important part of the standard. When you have the language objectives, you are not only helping the child that is an ELL, you are helping every child, because today there has been a decrease in the communication skills for everybody. It's not only the ELLs, even the native English speakers, they are having a difficult time because they don't know how to express themselves. They don't use complete sentences when they talk, and they have a lot of words that are not correctly or not appropriately used. So if the teacher includes a language objective aligned with the standards or the achievement expectations that you can with the content standards, that will help not only the ELLs, but every single child. There is a study that was conducted by the Center for Applied Linguistics, and it says the number of words that the children at the high school level master, and when I say master, I say they know how to use them. Not only do they know the meaning, but they know how to use them appropriately. And the study was that in the 1960s, there were an average of 120,000 words that a high school student could understand and manage and master. Then in the 70s, that number went down to 100,000. Then by 2004, it went down to 74,000. And in 2010, it went down again to 55,000, sorry. So we can see that our communication skills are deteriorating, because if you go, how many students do you see that they are in the class or outside the class with their smartphones? So they depend on smartphones and the text, and in the text, they don't use complete sentences. They use symbols that mean like LOL, laughing a lot, and that's the only one that I know. I'm sorry, because I am too old to learn them all. But it says and it shows that the lack of communication is increasing, and that children don't know how to use many of the words that they listen to them at home, but they don't practice. There are no communication skills whatsoever, and this is a sad part that we need as teachers. We need to compensate, because otherwise the people who are providing jobs, they don't want that type of people. They don't want that type of students, or rather that they don't know how to communicate. When I was in a conference about, and there was this panel where there were people from IBM, from AT&T, and from two other important companies. And the question was, what do they seek to find in a potential candidate, in a candidate for a job? And it was interesting to say that nobody said that they wanted a master's degree, they wanted a doctoral degree. They didn't talk about the GPA, nothing about school. What they say, I would like to see someone who learns how to work, who knows how to work in teams, who can communicate and that is proactive. So if we go to the real world, we could see that what people want is to have those rabbis that can communicate, that can convey a message rather than just, yeah, I was a valedictorian and I was Delta Kappa and I graduated with honors. That doesn't count. What they want is that they can communicate and they are team members. And the assessment is the same. In many states, they are trying to have assessments every 2 or 3 months, because they want to prepare the children for the standardized test. Whatever the assessment that you use, it has to be developed from the grade level achievement standards. And it can be based on alternate achievement standards if you're talking for the ELL. But what is important is that the level of difficulty needs to be the same. Not the language, but the same. So some characteristics of authentic assessment include they are based on the academic achievement standards. They should measure the proficiency of the full range of content, but at the same time, they have to be cognitive complex, but considering the level of language proficiency of the ELL. So these are some characteristics of the authentic assessments that can be used for the English language learners. Any questions or comments right now? Well, before we leave, I would like to say that we have a series of resources and bibliography of the work that I have consulted for this presentation. And we hope that what we have shared today is useful in your efforts of working with the networks and with people at the schools and in the classrooms. The next part of the community practice will take place on April 20 and 21, because it is a 2-part topic. We're going to have the first part on April 20, which is a Monday, and in the second part the following Tuesday.
Rosie, this is Denise.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I got a copy of the handout for today.
Okay, I send them to you.
Okay, thank you. If you did send them, I overlooked them, and I'm sorry.
I don't think I sent them today. So
okay.
No,
not a problem.
Yeah, I will.
And the PowerPoints are very helpful.
Oh, that's good. Well, I try to put the basics, but in a way that you can use it afterwards, because sometimes it's a lot of theory, but that's already written to practice. And Bernal, I don't know if Bernal is a part of this webinar, but he was telling me that he might be interested in 1 or 2 of these webinars that we have face-to-face. So if you think that is the case, you have the calendar and you have the topic of the webinars in there. So it will be convenient if you have the opportunity and you are interested in having those 1 or 2 topics face-to-face, so that we can accommodate a day where I can travel over there and we get together. Just comment it with Bernal, because that would be something that he would be interested in.
Okay, that sounds good, and I would look forward to a couple of sessions face to face. This is certainly better than not having an opportunity to go over the information, but we'll check and see.
Right. Okay. So I think that this, when you close this webinar, it will take you to a survey that we ask you to please answer and resubmit back because, as you know, Fed, they want to know how we do it.
Okay.
Okay,
Rosie.
Thank you very much for your participation, and I hope, again, that this has been of help to you. So am I right, Mark, that once they close this webinar, they will be sent to the survey?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for everything. Have a nice rest of the afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.